Chapter 19. Theo. Okay, what's going on? I looked up at my sister and frowned. Don't act dumb. Why are you moping in your gravy? I sat up straighter and threw my shoulders back. I'm not moping in my gravy. Louisa raised a blonde eyebrow at me. No? Then why aren't you eating? As Thanksgiving. You'd usually have a whole turkey finished by now. I set my fork down and sighed. I dunno. Just not hungry, I guess. The room was quiet for a moment before my sister broke the silence. Mom, we need to get him to a doctor. Our mom chuckled as she took a sip of wine. Leave your brother alone, baby. Louisa turned wide eyes to her as she pointed her fork at me. He's sulking. All over my favorite holiday. I'm not sulking, I insisted. Mom. Theo, Mom said. You are a little long in the face. I thought you said my face was handsome, I muttered. Handsome and long, she countered. What's going on? As you know, Lou. Won't drop it until you come clean. She's right, my sister piped up unnecessarily. I sighed and let my shoulders fall. It was clear I wasn't getting out of this conversation. Maybe if I'd gotten even 5 minutes of sleep last night, I'd have been able to hide my bad attitude. Honestly, I probably could have gotten away with a moody shit if I'd been able to eat, but ever since I left North Carolina I hadn't been able to choke anything down. The real problem though was I hadn't stopped thinking about what Dell was doing with the guys this whole weekend and hating that I couldn't be there. Which made me feel like a massive dick because I should have been happy to be with my sister and mom. They were my family and they meant everything to me. But goddamn, it felt like I couldn't breathe so far away from her. Is it the band? Lou asked. Nah, band's good. What about Roman? Is he still drinking too much? She asked next. My eyes shot to our mom, who already had her jaw on her lap. Way to go, Lou. I sneered before Mom erupted. Roman's got a drinking problem? Since when? Has someone talked to him about this? Have you researched rehabs yet? What are we gonna do? Mom! I tried to yell over her increasingly frantic questions. Roman doesn't have a drinking problem. I only half lied. He just sometimes drinks too much after a show and does dumb shit. We've all been there. Except he'd been there a lot more lately than any of us ever had. And it wasn't just after a show that he was drinking. But she didn't need to know that. We had it under control. Okay, Mom said as she stood with her plate. Fine. You two sort this out. Because I want to have dessert in peace. We both mumbled our agreement, and I waited until she left the room to speak. Again. It's not the band and it's not Roman, okay? It's just this girl. That. Oh my God. Lou. This is about a girl, she screamed. A real girl? Or some groupie? Don't get my hopes up over some bitch who just wants to show you off to her friends. Lou, I tried again, but she was nowhere ready to stop. What's her name? Where did you meet her? What's she like? When do I get to meet her? Lou. What? She yelled. Can I talk, please? She waved a hand. Of course. What are you waiting for? You to take a breath. She inhaled deeply through her nose. Okay, I'm ready. I shook my head with a laugh. Her name's Dell. That's such a pretty name. Is it short for Adele? Tell me she shares her name with that queen. It's Delilah, actually. That was the first time I'd ever said her full name out loud, and I liked the way it felt on my lips. Oh my God, Delilah is even prettier. Do you have her on social media? Can I see a picture? Mason has someone handling our social medias. Louisa rolled her eyes. Well, excuse me. I pulled out my phone and unlocked the screen before sliding it across the table. That's her with the pink hair. My sister looked up at me, her eyes twice their normal size. You have her picture as your home screen. I shrug. It's a picture of all of us the day we left for tour. That is so sweet, she squealed. And Dell is beautiful. Ooh, is she sassy? She looks like she'd be sassy. My lips twitched with a smile I couldn't stop. Yeah, she's sassy as hell. Lou clapped. I love her already. When do I get to meet her? I shrugged. I dunno, Lou. It's complicated. What's complicated about it? Does she not want to deal with you traveling? A laugh burst out of me. No, not even close. The complicated part is she's already on tour with me. Louisa paused for a minute. Wait, what? The new opening act I told you about? That's Delaware. That's Dell, she screamed. You didn't tell me you had a crush on your opening act. I rolled my eyes. It's not a crush, Lou. Her blue-green eyes narrowed as she nodded. It's not, is it? It's more than that. I looked away as fast as I could, but I knew I hadn't hidden everything from her. Hell, I'd never been able to keep shit from her. I reached up and rubbed the back of my neck. I dunno, Lou. I told you it's fucking complicated. Are you worried you'll get sick of each other while touring together? I looked back at her and laughed. I could never get sick of Dell, I said. Before I could stop myself. Louisa's eyes got soft. Then what's the problem? I blew out a deep breath. No one's allowed to date on tour. She'd get kicked off if we did. That's bullshit. That's the rules. And I fucking wrote them. Then you can break them. I shook my head. It's not that easy. Bullshit, she yelled again. Theo, I've never seen you give a shit about a girl. Even when we were younger, no one ever held your attention for more than few days. You can't just let this girl walk away. I'm not just letting her walk away. Then what are you doing? She yelled. Having Thanksgiving dinner with my family. No, you're not, she screamed over me. You're giving up on the first woman you've ever cared about. Goddamn it, Lou. What the fuck do you want me to do? I can't touch her until the tour is over. Does she know you're waiting for her? I opened my mouth but then closed it again before I could answer. No, I finally said. She doesn't. Then you need to make sure you tell her. She should know something like that. I squeezed my eyes closed and clenched my hands into fists on the table. I've just been trying to avoid her so I don't cross that line again. I know if I do, I won't want to stop. Lou's eyes got all hazy again. You really like her, don't you? My heart thundered in my chest, and I had no choice but to tell the truth. Yeah, I do. She stared at me for so long I started squirming in my chair. Holy shit. Are you in love with her? I shot her a glare even as my heart thumped painfully in my chest. Lou. She rolled her eyes. Fine. Figure that shit out on your own. She grabbed a crescent roll off the table and ripped a piece off. If you were going to be mopey away from her, why didn't you invite her and the band here for Thanksgiving? Her sister lives in Charlotte, so she's staying there. My hands fisted again as I clenched my jaw tight. And fucking Declan invited himself to go with her. Lou giggled and I shot her a glare. I'm sorry. That man is just shameless. He's a dick. And then fucking Walker and Sawyer added their names to the guest list too. And she didn't invite you? I looked away again. She did, but I said no. Why? I already had my ticket to come home. You could have rescheduled your ticket for another time. I just shrugged and kept my eyes on my mashed potatoes. Finally Louisa growled and I looked up at her. Is this because of me? I didn't want to lie, but I also knew the truth would hurt her, so I just shrugged. It's not a big deal, Lou. It's over. I'm here and I'm going back in a few days anyway. Theodore, I asked you a question. I sank down in my seat at the mention of my full name. Lou, what was I supposed to do? I asked as I finally met her gaze. I just told you I was coming home for the weekend and you were so excited. How was I just gonna tell you I changed my mind to go hang out with some girl? But she's not just some girl, is she? I blew out a deep breath. No, in fact, I was pretty sure she was the girl. She was quiet for too long and all it did was twist my stomach. Finally she said, You promised you wouldn't do this. Her voice was faint but full of so much pain it sliced right through my gut. Baby. No. Goddamn it, Theo. You promised me. You swore you'd never let my bullshit tie you down. You fucking promised. She screamed, her face now blotchy with the tears she was holding back. I sighed and got up to take a seat on her side of the table. I tried to grab her hand, but she yanked it away from me. Lou, it's not like that. Then how is it? She asked, her voice full of venom even as her eyes filled with moisture. I sighed again and let my head fall forward. My shoulders drooped and I squeezed my eyes closed. You're not the only one who's sad when I'm gone, I said softly. Do you think it's easy for me to be away from you? I looked up to meet her sad blue eyes. Do you think I wasn't just as excited to book that ticket and fly home? Yeah, but now you're sad that you're here. No, baby. You know I'm always happy to see you. You're my best friend. I love you more than anything. She shook her head. But you're still sad. And believe me, I can recognize sad. I shrugged and looked away. I guess I just miss Delaware. I chuckled once and Turned back to her. Is that dumb? That I miss the woman I'm not even allowed to talk to? Lou had this big cheesy smile on her face that I knew meant nothing good. Oh, my God, you're actually in love with her. My stomach pinched painfully, but for some strange reason those words didn't send me running like they would have any other time. Or with any other woman. That's it, she said before I could respond, which was good because I had no idea what to say. You need to get back to Charlotte. Flight's not until Saturday, I said, hating there were so many days between now and then. Then reschedule it for sooner. No, Lou. I'm here to spend the weekend with you and Mom. She snorted as she grabbed her plate and stood. Theo, I'm sure I speak for Mom too when I say we'd rather not have to look at your stupid grumpy face for another 2 days. Mom took that opportunity to walk back into the dining room with her hands full of pies. Is that true, Mom? She gave me a sweet smile. You are kinda raining on our parade, son. I sat back in my seat and folded my arms across my chest. Fine. If no one wants me here, then I'll leave. Good, Lou said as she swapped her dinner plate for a dessert plate. The sooner the better. Ma, did you take out the vanilla ice cream? Yeah, baby. It's on the counter. My sister got up to leave as I pulled out my phone and brought up the airlines app. Guess I'm going back to Charlotte, I muttered. Inside, that phrase sent my heart into overdrive. Now I just had to find the soonest flight available. Del, are you ever planning on forgiving him? I looked up from the pot I was drying. My mind was so busy racing with questions about what Theo was doing in Nashville that I'd almost forgotten B was standing next to me. Forgive him. What would Theo need forgiveness for? I didn't blame him for not coming here for Thanksgiving. It wasn't his fault I missed him so much I couldn't sleep. Yes. Don't you think this has gone on long enough? I turned to her with a frown and she rolled her eyes. Abraham, our brother, are you ever gonna let it go? You know he didn't mean what he said, and it was weeks ago. I just barely held in the eye roll as I turned back to my job. I don't recall him ever telling you he didn't believe in you, or that he was sure you'd fail. In fact, he had so much faith in you. He practically forced you into becoming the alpha of this pack. Do you see how differently he treats us? I stood there braced for what I was sure would be a sharp response, but my sister just sighed instead. It was times like these I was reminded how much she'd changed in the past year. I didn't say I thought what he did was okay. I just asked how much longer this was going to go on for. Why don't you ask him? He's the one who hasn't apologized yet. I know he's texted you because I've seen the messages. I turned around to glare at her. You think a text is gonna make up for what he said to me? Beside again. No. I know it's not, but it's a start. You're not even giving him a chance. I slammed down the last pan and tossed the dish rag. Quit talking his side. He's the one who fucked up, not me. She held up her hands in surrender. I know he did. He knows he did too. Then he can come find me and apologize to my face. Until then, I don't wanna talk to him. Fair enough. B-side. Now let's talk about what's actually bothering you. Huh. I said stupidly, hoping it would buy me some time. I'd known I was under a microscope since I got here Wednesday morning with the guys. B must have already had her suspicions because she'd been watching me like a hawk. You think I haven't noticed the bags under your eyes or the weight you've lost? Think I'd miss the food you shoved in your napkin at dinner? What the hell is going on, Del? I shrugged my shoulders and let out a deep breath. I dunno, B. I haven't been sleeping much and I've been basically living off peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Guess that's not enough. Her eyes flashed with anger. We'll get back to your diet in a minute. But what about tonight? I watched you eat nothing but a roll for dinner. I shrugged again. I just wasn't hungry. Nothing tastes right. B narrowed her ice blue eyes at me. Are you feeling okay? Not really, I confessed. I didn't sleep at all last night and I've barely been able to choke anything down all day. That's strange, she said slowly. I shrugged as a yawn escaped my lips. Nah, I'm sure it's just the tour schedule catching up with me. I think I'll go to bed early tonight. Does this have anything to do with avoiding Abraham? Night, B. I called as I ignored her question and escaped to my room. Once there, I started the ultimate bedtime routine in the hopes it would help me sleep. I took a bath, lit a lavender candle and rubbed chamomile lotion all over my body but still tossed and turned for hours. So it seemed like only seconds after I closed my eyes, B shook my shoulder. Del, you need to get up. I rolled over and cracked an eyelid open. What? Why? I just got a call from the front gate. Theo's here. Chapter 21. Del. Could someone pass the jelly? I said around a mouthful of food. Here. I froze as his deep voice washed through me. With a glance into Theo's hazel eyes I said thanks, and grabbed the jar, careful not to touch him. You look like you're feeling better, B said, dragging my attention away from Theo. I shrugged as I took a bite of my scrambled eggs. I feel better. Did you get any sleep last night? I nodded. Yeah, actually. I passed right out. My sister hummed with a small smile on her face. And I see your appetite is back. Yeah, I woke up starving. I'm sure you did, she said with a chuckle. I frowned at her, but she'd already turned away. What about you, Theo? Did you sleep okay last night? My heart froze in my chest, and I didn't even dare to breathe as I waited for his answer. Yeah, I slept great. Thanks for letting me stay here. B waved his words away. You're welcome anytime. Theo dug back into his breakfast, but my sister wasn't done yet. You seem to have quite the appetite today. Have you been feeling okay lately? My frown deepened as my heart started to race. I looked from B to Theo and back again as the sick feeling grew in my stomach. Not really, Theo admitted. I'm feeling better now though after that good night's sleep. I bet you are, she said with a grin that just kept growing. Okay, B, I said as I tossed the fork onto my plate. Cut the cryptic shit. What are you trying to get at? My sister only smiled. You really don't see it, do you? See what? I asked, my voice rising. B rolled her eyes. You two are fated, dummy. The entire room fell silent, no one even daring to breathe as B's words echoed all around us. My heart was banging so hard against my ribs it actually hurt. I could feel Theo's gaze on the side of my face, but I couldn't look at him. How could this happen? Hey folks. Sorry I'm late, Mason said as he walked into the room. Not sensing the awkward tension yet, he continued to ramble on. If everyone's up for it, I've got some rehearsal time booked for later today and a few interviews we can do this weekend. Might as well use this time in Charlotte wisely, right? No one answered him. Del, Theo finally said, his voice full of so much hope and anxiety it tore at my heart. But my eyes were still on B as the rage grew in my system. How? I yelled. How the fuck is everyone finding their fated mates all of a sudden? No, I shoved my chair back and stood up. This is fucking bullshit and you know it. Fated mates are supposed to be rare. What are the odds 4 out of the 5 of us would find ours? That shouldn't even be possible. My voice was becoming shrill as the hysteria built in my system. I didn't even know what I was saying anymore. Everything was chaotic as the image of my father dying on our kitchen floor swirled through my head like a tornado. No. No. I hadn't realized I'd said that last one out loud until B cleared her throat. Del, what's the matter? This is a good thing, she said gently. I looked up at her, refusing to even glance at Theo. If I had to see the hurt I knew I was causing him reflected in those hazel eyes, I'd lose the slight grip I had on my emotions. You think this is a good thing? I see that. You think it's a good thing that we lost our mom and dad on the same goddamn day? You think it's good that 5 kids became orphans in a matter of hours? I yelled. B's eyes were full of the same demons haunting my mind. Del, you know what happened to Mom? You know she was taken from us too soon. She and Dad should have had another 50 happy years together. But they didn't. I screamed. And I refused to be like them. I don't think you have a choice, B muttered, and I shot a glare at her. A growl ripped its way out of my throat as I clenched my fists and fought with the urge to run. How the fuck did this even happen? I asked again to no one in particular. Actually, I've been thinking about that a lot lately and I might have a theory. Ellie spoke up. I turned my fiery gaze to her. And I grit out. She sat up straighter. Well, from everything I've learned, fated mates are not supposed to be so common. But with adding you into the mix, 80% of this family has found theirs now. Her voice was filled with wonder, and it just made me sick. Get to the point. Ellie, I spat. She sighed at my tone but continued. Well, since the werewolf magic is still so concentrated inside Will, I wonder if his presence has anything to do with all of you finding your mates. The room was quiet for a while again as everyone worked through that theory. Finally, Callie spoke up. But Wyatt joined the pack way before Will got there. Someone cleared their throat, and we all turned to the original werewolf. Where were you before Asheville? He asked, looking at Wyatt. We were all over Tennessee, but Gatlinburg for most of it. Will smiled. I spent the last 5 or more years roaming the Great Smoky Mountains as a wolf. Son of a bitch. Well, what about you and Abby? I asked her, desperate to grasp at any straw I could. I turned to Will. Were you slinking around Raleigh too? He just smiled and shook his head. I haven't had the chance yet. We should take a trip, Bea murmured to him. I watched through narrowed eyes as he leaned forward and kissed her cheek. Let's spend the weekend. We can have our baby moon there. Bea's eyes lit up, her smile so wide as I stood there glaring at them. A baby moon. Yeah, it's a thing human couples do shortly before they become parents. I've seen it all over Instagram. Bea laughed. You're on Instagram now? Could we focus? I yelled over their ridiculous conversation. If Will was never anywhere near Ellie or Abby before they met each other, then the theory must be wrong. Maybe they met organically. 1 in 5 is decent odds coming from fated mate. Parents, Callie piped up. She's also my descendant, Will added. That might have something to do with it. Wait, what? Declan yelled. We all turned to him and the rest of the guys who sat at the other end of the table. I'd almost forgotten they were even there. Well, except Theo. How could I forget him when I could still feel his eyes drilling into me? You're a descendant of the original werewolf? Declan continued, his eyes on Ellie. How the hell does that even happen? Let's not get into that. Will muttered and Bea nodded in agreement. We all remembered the last time Will's past with other women was brought up at a family dinner. Can we get back on topic, please? I said. What more is there to say? Bea asked. You two are fated. End of discussion. No, I growled. Not end of discussion. We're not fated. A sharp pain sliced through my gut, but it was foreign. Like it didn't actually belong to me. Can you feel him when he's close? Abraham finally spoke up and I turned my glare toward him. Can you sense when he's feeling something strong like happiness or sadness or anger? Was that what this was? Was I feeling Theo's emotions inside of me? Was that what this burning was in my stomach? I shook my head. Mind your business, Abraham. He threw his hands in the air. I'm just trying to help, Delaware. Sounds like you two are fated. What's the big deal? My eyes almost bugged out of my head. What's the big deal? I screamed. Did you have Dad's head on your lap listening to him whimper Mom's name as he died? Did you have to hold his hand until it turned cold? No, I did. So don't fucking tell me it's no big deal. I know exactly how big of a deal this is. I stood there with my fists clenched tight, struggling to breathe past the rage and fear running wild in my system. Finally, it was too much. I was either going to run or break down, and I refused to look weak in front of everyone. So I turned around and stormed out of the room. My name was called a few times, but I didn't stop for any of them. I couldn't. If I did, I'd start crying, and I was afraid I wouldn't have the strength to stop. I hadn't spent much time in this giant-ass place, so I didn't know where I was running off to, only that I needed to get away. Del, wait up. Leave me alone. I spat without slowing. Abraham sighed behind me before his big hand landed on my shoulder, and I had no choice but to stop. Come on, Delaware. We gotta talk. I spun around to glare at him, knocking his arm away from me. I don't have to do shit. You've had weeks to talk to me. I've sent texts. I took a step forward, my entire body trembling with the need to shift. You think a goddamn text is gonna make up for what you said to me? Abraham held my gaze for a long minute before he finally looked away and shook his head. No, I know it's not. Then you know why I didn't respond to any of them. He blew out a deep breath and sagged against the wall. I get it. I fucked up. You did more than fuck up. I yelled as all the pain from that night rushed out of the place I'd kept it hidden. You doubted me. You degraded me. You broke my fucking heart, Abraham. Just like that, the tears I'd been holding back rushed down my face, which just infuriated me more. Do you know how it felt to have you, my big brother, the man I've always looked up to, tell me you don't believe in me? That it was only a matter of time before I failed. Abraham struggled to hold my gaze before he finally looked away. I know, Del. I'm sorry. You built an office for Callie's dream job, and you practically forced B into becoming an alpha, but when I told you I'd just gotten the biggest opportunity of my career, you told me I'd fuck it up because I never take anything seriously. You're right, he said with a grunt. I was a fucking asshole and I didn't mean that shit, Delaware. Then why the fuck did you say it? I yelled as the tears fell even faster. I was scared, okay? He yelled even louder. I paused. Scared of what? He blew out a deep breath and ran a hand through his hair. Everything is changing and I'm not ready. I just lost B and now I was losing you too. Have 3 freaking kids coming into this world in like 6 months and half my family is gone. I rolled my eyes. We're not gone, Abraham. I wasn't just scared. He continued like he hadn't heard me. I was also mad at you for wanting to leave, he said, his voice soft like he could barely admit this. Abraham. He held up a hand. I know, Delaware. I know I was being an asshole. I just didn't want to lose my sister. He looked down at his feet before meeting my gaze. Again. I didn't want to come down to breakfast and not find you slumped over a bowl of cereal. I didn't want the lodge to be silent when you left and took your music with you. I didn't want you to play all these shows in cities I couldn't get to. Abraham, I tried again. He just shook his head. I was wrong, Del, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I ever said that shit. I'm sorry you had to go on tour believing I really felt that way. But most of all, I'm sorry it's taken me this long to make sure you knew how sorry I am. My heart squeezed in my chest as the tears ran unchecked down my face. So, you don't really think I'm a fuck-up? Abraham sighed and pulled me into his arms. No, Delaware. Not at all. But you're right. I cried against his cotton shirt. I never follow through. I never take anything seriously. He pulled me away from his chest. That's just because it's always been the wrong something for you. Now you're doing what you were always meant to do and you're killing it. My lips twitched at the familiar phrase. How would you know? Hey, I read the internet. I threw my head back with a laugh. The internet is not a newspaper, Abraham. You don't just read it. He rolled his eyes. Okay, so Evie reads that shit to me. That's not the point. What I'm trying to say is I know you're exactly where you're meant to be and I'm so proud of you. My eyes burned with more tears as I threw myself into his arms again. Thanks, Abby. He kissed the top of my head and looked down to meet my eyes. Do me a favor, though, and learn from my mistake. Don't dismiss something just because it scares you. What are you talking about? Del. My name being said by that deep voice froze every molecule in my body. Speared my brother with a glare, but he was already looking down the hall. Hey, Theo, my traitorous brother called as he stepped away from me. Abraham, he answered, but I could still feel his gaze on me. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for giving you a hard time that night at Callie's wedding. I know if you're fated to be with my sister, you must be one hell of a man. Abraham reached out a hand as Theo came to a stop in front of him. They shook for a moment before my brother yanked him into a one-armed hug. When they pulled apart, both had wide grins on their faces and my stomach twisted tighter. How could this be happening? How could Theo be my fated mate? What if I wasn't ready to give up my single life? What if I wasn't ready to settle down? I'll leave you two alone, Abraham said, and I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from calling out to him. When the sound of his footsteps finally faded away, Theo turned to me, his hazel eyes wary. Can we talk? Half of me wanted to run again while the other half wanted to wrap myself around him and never let go. I wasn't sure I was going to like what he had to say, but knew I didn't have a choice. This conversation was going to happen, whether I wanted it to or not. So I took a deep breath and said, okay. Chapter 22. Theo. I reached up to rub the back of my neck as I tried to figure out where to start. So that was a lot. Del's giggle ended with a sniffle that tore at my insides. I fisted my hands as I worked to keep my body still. I was trying so hard to control my reaction to her. But when she looked up at me with those ocean blue eyes swimming with tears, I caved. Del, I mumbled as I pulled her into my arms. The anxious excitement in me settled a bit when she didn't struggle against me. Instead, she wrapped her arms around my waist and rested her head on my chest. I'm sorry, she sighed. I looked down, but she had her eyes closed. Sorry for what? Her dark brows furrowed, and I had to fist my hands to stop myself from smoothing them out. I know I hurt your feelings back there. She paused for a minute and met my gaze again before continuing. That wasn't fair to you and I'm sorry. I shrug. You think you're the first woman to find out they're my fated mate and throw a fit about it? Felicity, I said with a wave of my hand. Happens. All the time. Del giggled again, the sound just a little happier this time. Oh, so you have tons of fated mates just hanging around. Of course, I said as I pulled her closer. You're just one of dozens. Keep them all in my closet and take them out when I want depending on my mood. She laughed louder. You're such an idiot. I actually had to get a storage container for all the extra fated mates I have now. There were too many to fit in my place and it was getting crowded. Del tried to slap my chest, but I caught her hand and brought it to my lips. Placed a kiss on her palm and smiled when she shivered. Wonder where I'll keep you, I murmured as I dipped my face into the crook of her neck. She shivered again as I breathed her in deeply. I'll obviously be kept on the top shelf, she whispered as I kissed her throat. I chuckled against her warm skin. Obviously. When I pulled away there was still a smile on her lips and I was so happy to see it I didn't care about anything else. Nothing has to change, I said, my voice low and deep and hopefully coming off stronger than I felt. I don't expect anything from you, Theo, she said, and there was so much emotion behind those two syllables it almost brought me to my knees. I tried to swallow but my throat was too dry. Just don't tell me I have to go back to not touching you anymore. As long as I can still talk to you and kiss you when I want, I don't care about anything else. Her eyes darted between mine as I stood there letting her read the truth for herself. I didn't care if she called me her mate, her boyfriend, or her fucking pool guy. If I got to be with her, it didn't matter. Okay, she breathed. My heart shot into the back of my throat, almost choking me with happiness. Yeah. She smiled and my whole fucking world rocked back into place. Yeah. Thank fuck, I mumbled before pressing my lips against hers. In an instant, a fire was lit between us, crackling and sizzling and growing speed as I kissed her harder. I was 2 seconds away from picking her up and running back to my borrowed room when the familiar sound of a throat being cleared burst through our private bubble. I pulled away from Del with a groan and turned to glare over my shoulder. What the fuck do you want, Mason? My manager continued to approach us like he wasn't intruding on a private moment. We need to talk about your situation. Del squirmed beneath me and I took a step back with a sigh. What about it? He came to a stop a few feet away and shook his head. You know the rules, Theo. My spine stiffened and my hands fisted. You're not fucking talking her away from me again, I snarled. Mason's eyes widened for a moment before he put his hands up in surrender. That's not what I was going to say. A bit of the violence fled my system and I was able to take a step back and curb the desire to punch him, but just barely. Then what were you gonna say? I said through gritted teeth. He sighed. Listen, we've only got 5 weeks until the tour is over. We've been doing great so far and I don't want anything to jeopardize what we've worked so hard for. You're not talking her from me, I said again, my jaw clenched just as tight. Theo, Del said, but I ignored her. I refused to compromise on this. I'd spent way too long denying myself the right to touch her. Now that I knew she was my mate, now that I knew she was fated to be mine, I couldn't go back to how we were before. No fucking way. I'm not trying to take anything from anyone, Mason said, his voice placating. But you have to think about everyone else on tour too. I have been thinking of them, I said, my voice just a rumble as I tried to control my anger again. He was a threat to me and my mate and I wouldn't allow that to happen. Now it's time to think about me in Delaware. We were both sick from being apart these past couple of days, which means you're not separating us again. Theo, Mason said, his tone gentle. I don't want to separate you two. Would never ask a pair of fated mates to stay away from each other. I didn't miss the way Del twitched when he mentioned fated mates but didn't comment on it. She had a good reason to be scared of what was happening between us. I just had to prove to her the reward was worth the risk. But, Mason continued, and my body stiffened with tension, you two also have to think about all the other people on tour with you. I don't want anyone else to feel awkward or out of place living with a couple. We all have to share a cramped space for another month or so, and we need to learn how to do that with this new change. So keep it PG in front of the kids? Got it. Anything else? I asked as I grabbed Del's hand. Mason narrowed his eyes at us. I don't want anything about your work ethic or performances to change either. I would never let a man interfere with my show, Del said. I frowned down at her as I dragged us back a step. We'll still get our jobs done, Mason. We good here? I asked as I retreated further. Meet and greets. You two better not let your relationship interfere with how the fans are treated. I stopped short and glanced at Delaware. She had a bored expression on her face, and I almost laughed before I started walking again. No worries, Mason. We can handle it. We should probably go over sleeping arrangements too, he called, but we were already halfway down the hall. I'm sleeping in her room from now on, I yelled before I pulled her around a corner and out of Mason's sight. You are you? Del asked as I dragged her behind me. I turned to shoot her a grin I knew she couldn't resist. Well, we could try fitting in my bunk if you want, I said with a shrug. It'll be cramped as fuck, but it might be fun for a night or two. We can work on figuring out what goes where to fit us together best, I said with an even bigger grin. Del rolled her eyes, but I didn't miss the way her cheeks heated with a blush. Goddamn, I'd missed that sight. In the next instant, doubt cast a shadow over her pretty face and I pulled us to a stop. I won't do anything you don't want me to do. I'll never stay where you don't want me. Just please don't tell me I have to keep away from you again because I'll lose my fucking mind. She smiled softly and reached up to cup my scruffy face. It was hard for me to stay away from you too. I hated it, she admitted, her voice quiet like she was afraid to speak too loud. I wrapped my hand around the back of her neck and dragged her closer again. Then let's not ever do that again, okay? Her smile was wary, but in her eyes I saw the hope she was scared to feel, and that was enough for me. Okay. Hey Charlotte. Thanks for coming out to see us. My name is Del McCoy and this is Love Me Like You Mean It. The whole venue erupted in noise as the lights went down with one single beam focused on her, like anyone would want to look anywhere else. Del was magnificent on stage. She was confident and flirty, fun and exuberant. She made you want to watch her. She made you want to get close in. The hope she'd turn that brilliant smile your way. As that thought ran through my head, Del looked over at me standing backstage and grinned. I raised a hand to wave and her smile got bigger before she turned back toward the audience. My heart pounded in my throat as I watched her. She's great, huh? We really lucked out. I looked over to see Mason's assistant, Larry, standing there watching Del with his arms folded around a clipboard. Yeah, I said before turning back to Delaware, she's amazing. He continued to stand there, and I frowned, wishing he'd go watch her somewhere else so I didn't have to share. A buzzing sound came from behind me, and Larry sighed as he searched his pockets. Hello, he muttered into his phone. I tuned out the rest of the conversation, happy to focus on Del absolutely slaying this Kelsey Ballerini song. Thankfully for Larry, he waited until she sang the last note to tap me on the shoulder. Hey Theo, you're gonna be hanging around watching her set, right? I rolled my eyes because he'd seen me watch every one of her performances for almost a month. Yeah, why? I'm supposed to stay here in case Del needs anything, but there's a problem with lighting I need to go take care of. Could you cover for me? I looked away. Yep, got it. Go away, I added in my mind. Thanks, man. I owe you. I snorted. Taking care of Del in any form would never be something I needed to be compensated for. Don't mention it. He threw a couple more thank yous my way, but I'd already tuned him out so I could listen to the original song Del was playing. I'd heard it dozens of times between rehearsals, soundchecks, and performances, but that didn't matter. My fingers still twitched with the need to play the chords along with her. She finished the last note with a flourish like she usually did, but this time the guitar pick flew out of her hands and into the crowd. There was a skirmish for the little piece of plastic, and finally someone found it and held it in the air victoriously. Del laughed. That's what I meant to do. The whole venue chuckled with her. You've been rockin' with me this whole time, girl. You deserve that pick, she said to the woman with her hand still in the air. The crowd cheered, and my heart swelled for her. She really was meant to be on stage. I watched as she searched the mic stand for another pick and came up empty. She turned to me and I jumped into action. With a quick check of my pockets, I found a pick of my own to give her. When I held it up, Del started walking my way, but I shook my head and walked out on stage to meet her. The crowd was silent for a minute before someone yelled, "More!" and the rest of the venue starting screaming. I gave them a smile and a wave as I made it to Del's side. Her eyes were quizzical, despite the smile on her face. She held out a hand and I placed the pick on her palm. "Thanks," she muttered and turned back to the crowd. On a whim, I leaned over and pressed a kiss on her cheek. "You're welcome. Gorgeous." Del blushed furiously, and the audience hollered even louder as I walked off stage with another wave to them. She strummed her guitar softly, and when they'd settled down, she leaned in and asked, "Do y'all happen to know him?" The crowd screamed and laughed, and she started playing louder. "Okay, on that note, this is Backseat Romeo." I couldn't help the chuckle as she started singing her original song. It was about a smooth-talking guy who she tries to stay away from but can't. I'd heard her play it a couple times before but never had it dedicated to me. Great laugh. Killer smile. "That's how you got me to stay for a while. I said you'll be gone by morning, and you said never. That's how you got me to stay forever." Was this her way of telling me I had a shot at a future with her? That if I just tried hard enough I'd get to keep her? It didn't matter if this was a secret message or all in my head because I was going to try like hell no matter what. Del set Wound down, and I waited anxiously for her to walk backstage before I had to go join the band. "Thank you again, Charlotte," she yelled with a wave before she finally started walking toward me. Her smile was so bright it made my heart pound. She pulled the guitar strap from around her neck and set it down before she got to me and jumped into my arms. I caught her with a laugh that got cut off by her lips against mine. Del's hands dug into my hair as I squeezed her ass and let everything else go. All that mattered was this moment with Del in my arms and her mouth on mine. When she finally pulled away with a gasp, she said, "Thanks for the pic." I laughed and reluctantly set her on her feet with another kiss. "If that's the thanks I get, I'll keep a whole pocket full of 'em just for you." She giggled and I couldn't help giving her one more kiss. "You were amazing." Somehow her smile got bigger. "Thanks." We stood there just grinning at each other before a set of approaching footsteps reached us. "Theo, Mason is looking for you," Larry said. I worked to keep the sneer off my face as I took a painful step away from Del. "I'll see you after the show." She nodded, her face still flushed with happiness. "I'll be here." Chapter 23. Del. "How are y'all doing tonight?" Roman yelled into the microphone. He really did have a way with the crowd. Somehow, the surliness worked in his favor and just made the audience more desperate to win his affection. He had great stage presence, but I had my eyes locked on Theo. He was picking a few notes on his guitar, smile wide as he waited for Roman to start the show. My heart was pounding in my throat as I watched his strong hands play the guitar in such an effortless way it made me wish I could take the instrument's place. As if I'd said those words out loud, Theo's head whipped in my direction. Gave him a little wave and a smile from backstage, fully expecting the same from him. So when he stopped playing to blow me a kiss, my cheeks heated. The blush only got worse as the men in the crowd cheered and the women cooed at his mushy display of affection. His eyes were still on me when Roman turned to glare at Theo. "If y'all are done, we can start the show." Thankfully, he didn't say that into the microphone, but it was loud enough for the front of the crowd to hear. Theo rolled his eyes and strummed a loud note on his guitar. "Ready when you are, Romy Poo," he said with a smile. I laughed and Roman turned to me with a glare before he leaned into the mic. "This is Don't You Wanna." The music blared to life as Roman started singing and I got lost in the song. I was actually embarrassed that I hadn't known any of their music before coming on tour because they were amazing. I should have been following them for years. There was something about the smooth guitar riffs and smoky, gritty quality of Roman's voice that just drew you in. Of course, what really did it for me were those special occasions when Theo would lean into his mic and sing back. His voice was so deep and melodic, I couldn't help but let my eyes drift close every time he sang. I'd pretend it was just me and him in some cabin in the woods, wearing nothing but our guitars as we made love and music all night. The past 2 days with him had been incredible. It was nice to get that time to ourselves without the cramped atmosphere of the bus we'd spent every night together, and barely left the other's sight throughout the day. It was hard going back to sharing him with the world, but he somehow made it tolerable. If we were in the same room, he always found a way to get his hands on me, an arm around my shoulders, a hand on my knee. It didn't seem to matter what he was touching as long as he could and each touch brought me back to those secret moments in empty hallways and dark rooms almost stealing my breath. I was in one of those all-encompassing daydreams when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I recognized the scent immediately. "Hey Larry," I said as I spun around to face him. "What's up? You had a great show tonight," he said, his smile wide. "Sorry I wasn't here to help when you needed me." I frowned as I ran his words through my head, trying to make sense of them. "Oh," I said finally, "you mean when I needed a new pick?" I waved his words away. "Don't even worry about it. Theo had one for me to use." "Good thing he was there to help you then," he said, his eyes focused somewhere over my shoulder. Finally, he shook himself and met my gaze again. "I just wanted to let you know you left your dressing room door open. Closed it for you, but you might want to make sure nothing's missing." My heart dropped to my shoes as my mind raced through all the things I'd left in there. "Shit," I muttered. "Okay, thanks Larry. I'll go check it out now." He smiled and said, "Anytime," before hurrying away. I hated to miss the end of Theo's show, but I knew my wallet was in the bag I'd left in my dressing room, and I could not afford to lose that. I was on a very fixed budget, and something like getting all my cash stolen would be a setback I couldn't recover from. I just turned down the hall where my dressing room was when I found someone standing outside my door. My feet froze in place as my hackles rose and I prepared to defend me and my shit. "Hello," I called. The person spun around and I recognized him instantly. "Hey Del, what are you doing down here?" I narrowed my eyes at Brian as I walked toward him. "I think the better question is, what are you doing down here?" He grabbed the plastic hanging around his neck and held it up for me. "Backstage pass," he said with a smile. "I couldn't miss seeing you play in North Carolina again." I gave him a weak smile as I glanced from my door to him. "The backstage viewing area is on the other side of the building." Brian rolled his eyes, smile still on his face. "I'm awful at directions. Could get lost in my own apartment if I wasn't careful," he said with a chuckle. His big hand came down on my shoulder as he walked past me. "Thanks, Delaware. See you at the meet and greet," he said as he walked away. I watched him leave, not daring to move until he was out of sight. With another glance at my door, an ominous feeling settled in my gut. I looked around again to make sure I was alone, cursing my impatience. If I just waited for Theo's set to be done, he could have come with me, and I wouldn't have had to stand in the hall like a big scaredy cat. With a growl, I stomped across the remaining feet between me and my dressing room and flung the door open. It crashed into the wall with a bang and ricocheted back toward my face before I caught it. My eyes scanned the interior as I took a deep breath and tried to analyze the scene. There didn't seem to be anything out of place, and there were no scents I didn't recognize. With a cautious look over my shoulder, I entered the room and closed the door behind me. I took another deep breath, checking once more for any foreign smells before I crossed the room to my belongings. My guitar case was still sitting on the table next to an unopened bottle of water, but it was the folded piece of paper and gift box sitting on my bag that made me pause. My heart raced and my smile grew as I grabbed the note and opened it. "I missed watching you sing for me. You were stunning. Now that you're breaking all the rules, so am I. Keep my gift with you wherever you go, and you'll never be alone. I'll see you soon." I read the note another 2 times, my smile growing with each round. I hadn't expected him to keep writing me love letters in light of our new situation, but I wasn't complaining. I just added to my growing pile of notes from him. The paper got folded up and put in my back pocket before I reached for the box. It wasn't heavy and nothing rattled when I shook it, so I pulled off the lid and looked inside. "Ah," I breathed as I pulled out a plush teddy bear. It had on a little bow tie and top hat to match, which just made it even cuter. I pulled the stuffed animal to my chest and gave it a squeeze before propping it up on the vanity. I'd have to make sure to thank Theo for this properly later. A set of footsteps stopped outside my door before someone knocked. "Del? Are you coming to the meet and greet?" Mason yelled from the other side. I gave my new teddy one last wistful look before fluffing my hair and turning toward the door. When I pulled it open, I found a predictably stressed Mason with a cell phone held up to his face. "Hey Mason, I'm ready." He glanced at me. Good. Do you know where you're going?" I nodded and gave his arm a squeeze on my way past. "Yep. See you there." When I arrived at the VIP room, it was already packed with people, but that didn't stop Theo's eyes from finding me immediately. His smile was wide and so beautiful it made my heart pound an erratic rhythm in my chest. "Excuse me," he muttered to the group of girls surrounding him. I'd never let myself get jealous of a groupie, but I had to admit, after weeks of watching them get to interact with him when I couldn't, this felt good. Theo walked with purpose across the room, every person moving out of his way. As he sped toward me, when he was in reaching distance, he pulled me into his arms and lifted me off the ground. "Hey darlin'," he said in my ear. "Where you been?" I smiled, even as my eyes darted around the room to see what kind of attention we were getting. I had to run to my dressing room because someone left my door open. Theo set me down, his smile confused and his brow furrowed. "Who was in your dressing room?" I rolled my eyes and slapped his chest. "Quit playin' that." His grin was falling as I watched, but before he could say anything else, Mason walked over and slapped him on the back. "How we doing here, folks? Are you two mingling?" Theo rolled his eyes as he shook Mason's hand off him. "Relax, Maze. I was just saying hi." "Good. Then let's get some pictures taken." Theo let out a huff but allowed Mason to lead him back over to the band, where they had a line of fans waiting for pictures with them. I watched him for a moment before someone approached me for an autograph, and suddenly I was too busy to pay attention to Theo. It wasn't until much later when he made it back to my side that he leaned down and whispered, "Seriously, who was in your dressing room?" I looked up at him with a frown. "What are you talking about?" "Theo," someone squealed, and he ripped his gaze off me to focus on a blonde bombshell who just approached him. "I'm so excited to meet you. I'm your biggest fan." I kept the eye roll to myself. Did she really think he hadn't heard that 1,000 times before? "I'll see you later," I called as I turned to walk away. Just because I wasn't jealous of these groupies didn't mean I had to stick around and watch them fawn all over him. There was only so much of that I could take in one night. Before I got too far, Theo grabbed my arm to stop me. "Could you just give me a minute, honey?" he asked the groupie. She stuck out a pouty lower lip, but he turned away like she was already invisible. Theo walked us a few feet away to a relatively quiet corner of the room. "Who was in your dressing room?" My heart started to thump a little harder as I stared into his genuinely confused eyes. "Theo, stop messing around." He clenched his jaw and leaned in closer. "Del, I'm not playing with you. Answer the question." I took a step back as my stomach sank lower and lower inside me. "Weren't you in my dressing room?" I whispered the question I was terrified I already knew the answer to. "Why the fuck would I go in your dressing room when you weren't there?" My heart was stuttering in my chest as my palms began to sweat. "Didn't you leave me a note? And a gift?" I squeaked as my mind raced with questions I couldn't even begin to answer. "What note?" he growled. "What gift?" Everything inside me froze except my eyes as they widened. "Haven't you been leaving me notes for weeks?" I asked, my voice just a whisper. Theo's jaw pulsed with how hard he was clenching it. "No, I haven't left you anything." My entire universe ground to a halt as I tried to make sense of what he was saying. It didn't take long for the bile to rise in my throat and the pieces to come together. I focused on Theo again. "We need to go," he said and grabbed my arm. We were halfway across the room when Roman shouted, "Where the fuck are you going?" Theo ignored him as he dragged me out of the room and down the hall. "How fucking long have you been getting these notes?" he seethed. I swallowed. "Ever since the first night of tour." Theo's head whipped in my direction, his hazel eyes spitting fire. "What?" he bellowed. I pulled out of his grip and folded my arms over my stomach. It actually felt like I'd be sick, and I'd never thrown up before in my life. "I thought they were from you," I whispered. "I thought that was your way of still being with me even though we couldn't actually be together." His eyes turned remorseful as he reached out and cupped my face. I was keeping my promise. A note wouldn't have been enough for me. Pressed my cheek into his palm, and he sighed before pulling me against his chest. "I don't like this, Del," he murmured into my hair. The terror was there, just beyond the safety of his arms. It was snarling and threatening and ready to swallow me whole. But maybe if I could just stay here I'd be okay. If Theo could just hold me and never let go, I wouldn't have to face whatever was waiting for me. But that was fantasy and I couldn't live there forever. The reality of the situation was, Someone who wasn't Theo had been entering my dressing room and leaving me love letters for weeks. I didn't know who they were or what they really wanted, but it filled me with this icky feeling that clung to my insides. I want to see these notes, he said as he pulled away. I took a deep breath, hoping it could help settle my nerves. It didn't. I have one here, I said, reaching into my pocket. But the rest are in my room on the bus. Theo took the note and unfolded it, hands visibly shaking with anger. His eyes darted across the page over and over until he crumbled it in his fist with a growl. What gift is he talking about? He asked, his voice deep and dangerous. I tried to swallow past my dry throat. It's a teddy bear. It's still in my dressing room. Let's go, he said with a nod and grabbed my hand. We'd only made it a few feet when his phone started to ring. He ignored it until the call ended, but when it started right back up, he growled again and yanked it out of his pocket. What? He yelled. Where are you? Mason's voice drifted from the phone. I've got something to take care of. We're in the middle of a meet and greet. I don't give a fuck about the meet and greet, Mason, he yelled before he crushed the phone in his hand. He never slowed as he dragged me down the hall, and that was the moment I knew. He was scared, and now I was terrified. Chapter 24. Theo. Wait here, I said as I brought us to a stop a few feet from her dressing room door. Already I was searching the area with my senses, trying to take in every bit of information that could help me. I might only be a musician, but I'd been in enough dangerous situations to know how to take care of myself. I just needed to hope I could take care of her too. Stay alert and ready to run if something happens, I said as I reluctantly let go of her arm. Dell rolled her eyes and jutted out a hip. I was raised by alphas and two of my siblings are alphas. I know how to defend myself. I couldn't help the grin that pulled at the corners of my lips. I'm sure you do. All at once, the severity of the situation came rushing back, and the smile fell off my face. I'm going to make sure it's empty before you go in. There. I opened my mouth to give her another warning but knew she didn't need. Finally I said, stay safe, because I couldn't help myself. With one last look around to make sure we were alone, I stalked over to her door and threw it open. An array of scents rushed at me, and I did my best to take them in one by one. I could pick out Dell and Mason and Larry and even a hint of Declan, but the rest of the smells were humans I wasn't familiar with. Was one of them the bastard that had been leaving her these fucking notes? I'd already known the room was empty by the lack of a heartbeat in there, but I checked it over anyway before I waved Dell in. I slammed the door and locked it behind her before I turned around. A tiny corner of my heart cracked right off when I found Dell standing in the middle of her dressing room, hugging herself like she had no one else to comfort her. I wasted no time crossing the room and pulling her into my arms. Hey, I murmured into her hair. It's gonna be all right. We're gonna stop. Whoever this is, okay. Dell looked up at me, her eyes still wary, but she nodded. Okay. I leaned in to give her what was supposed to be a chaste kiss, but the moment my lips met hers, that ember that burned only for her roared to life, and I lost control. My hands dug into her long wavy hair as I pulled her face to mine and got lost. Dell's soft fingers traced along my biceps as I tried to remember all the reasons I couldn't back her up against the wall and fuck her like I wanted to. Finally, I pulled away with a groan and rested my forehead on hers. We have shit to do, I panted as I tried to catch my breath. Dell nodded. You're right. Quit messing around. I laughed and kissed her nose before stepping away. The reality of the situation crept back in, and my stomach clenched tight again. Where's the gift? Dell cleared her throat and jerked her head over my shoulder. On the vanity. What the fuck is a vanity? She giggled and walked around me to point at the table with the mirror attached. That is called a vanity, and that is the present. All humor vanished as I hurried past her to grab the only item there. This cheap bear? I asked, holding it up to her. She frowned. I thought it was cute when I thought it was from you. My heart squeezed just a little in my chest. Darlin', if you want a stuffed animal from me, I'll bring you to build a bear and let you make as many as you want. Her eyes lit up. Is that a promise? Baby, that's a goddamn guarantee. Now is this the only thing he's ever left? You. I watched her face slowly fall and wish I'd been able to keep up the fun and flirty conversation, but this was more important. Her safety was my top priority, and something deep in my gut didn't like this situation. Yeah, nothing else besides the notes. I spun the bear around in my hands, looking for a tag or something that might tell me where it was bought. As I did, I heard the faintest tinkling sound and froze. Did you hear that? I asked Dell without looking up. Yeah, she said softly. I shook the stuffed toy and that rattling noise happened again, and now I was sure there was something wrong. With a flick of my wrists, I tore the stupid thing in two, ignoring Dell's gasp when some kind of electronic device clattered to the floor. Before I could even bend over, she raced forward and swiped it off the ground. What the fuck? She muttered as she rotated the thing in her hands. What is it? I swallowed hard as I recognized what she was holding. It's a camera, I croaked. With a glance at the pieces in my hands, I finally spotted the tiny lens on the bow tie. It's like a nanny cam thing. Dell's heart pumped frantically as her wide eyes darted around the room. He was watching me? She said, her voice shaking on the last word. A growl raced up my esophagus, but I swallowed it at the last second. I needed to curb the emotional shit and face this with a clear head. Dell's safety depended on it. Can I have that? I asked, motioning to the camera she still held in her trembling hands. She gave it up right away and I crushed it until it was unrecognizable. Then I tossed it on the floor and stomped on it with my boot. Just in case. Get your shit and let's go. Dell stood there staring at the broken pieces of plastic and metal until I cleared my throat and she jumped. I know it's a lot to handle, Dell, but I need to get you out of here and back onto the bus as soon as possible. So, please let's go. She nodded once, blew out a deep breath and got to work. Her movements were jerky but quick as she tossed all her shit back in her bag and picked up her guitar case. I'm ready, she said, but I'd already grabbed her hand. Thankfully, I found a side exit pretty fast and was able to get her back to the bus in record time. We tossed a hello to the driver before I dragged her back into her bedroom. I want to see the other letters, I said, my voice as even and calm as I could make it with the anger and fear beating at my insides. Dell nodded again and tucked some pink hair behind her ear before she turned to dig through her wardrobe. When she spun back around with a small plastic bag full of folded up pieces of paper, I felt my stomach twist. This is all of them, she said as she held it out to me with shaking hands. I took the bag and set it aside before sitting on the bed and pulling her onto my lap. Hey, I got you, okay? She closed her eyes and nodded, but I could still see the doubt etched on her face. I just thought it was you the whole time, she whispered. The notes were so sweet. I looked forward to them after every show. Now I just feel dirty. I wrapped my arms tight around her waist and kissed the side of her head. You're not, though. She blew out a deep breath but didn't answer. I sighed and kissed her head again before I reached for the bag of notes. One by one, I read the sugar-sweet words this asshole wrote to her, each letter making me more sick to my stomach. When I'd finally finished the last one, I shoved them away and turned to her. I need you to tell me what you did in that dressing room after you got the bear. Dell blanched for a moment but then shook her head and said, I gave it a hug. Her face paled even more before she cleared her throat and continued. Then Mason came to get me, so I fixed my hair and left with him. My hands were fisted so tight my knuckles were creaking, but I somehow kept the violence contained. But fuck. Every goddamn inch of me was so fucking angry I could have ripped the bus apart with my bare hands. Where the fuck is he? I jumped to my feet, heart hammering against my ribs as Roman's voice reached us and I found the perfect way to let off some of this steam. Stay here, I muttered to Dell as I stood up and left the room. Hell no, she said as she followed me anyway. I made sure to keep ahead of her as we walked to the front half of the bus and came face to face with Roman and the rest of the band. What the actual fuck more? He barked as soon as our eyes met. My hands fisted again as I stomped over to him. Dell, was all I was able to get out before he was in my face screaming. I don't wanna fucking hear about Dell. I don't give a fuck about Dell. Roman, Mason warned from behind him. No, fuck that. We had a fucking deal. You made a promise, Theo. Band over everything else and you get one look at her fat ass and now you wanna throw it all away. He yelled. I didn't think. I just swung. My fist connected with his cheek, and I felt the bone snap under my knuckles. Roman's head whipped to the side and his face started bleeding, but he turned back to me with a lopsided grin. That all you got, pussy? I cocked my fist back again, but Del jumped in between us. Stop. Enough. This is ridiculous. There's no reason to fight. You're right, Roman spat. We shouldn't be fighting over you. You're nothing. The only reason you're on this fucking tour is because you're a werewolf. We already knew we were hiring you before you even auditioned. There was no stopping me, and this time when I punched him I broke his nose. Blood pooled at his feet, but he looked up at me and smiled anyway. Keep it up more. Let's throw this all away over a bitch. No one's throwing anything away, Mason said as he stepped between us. Grabbed Del's arm and dragged her back behind me as I continued to eye Roman. You two need to settle the hell down. No, Roman shouted, reaching over Mason's shoulder and pointing his finger in my face. You're wrecking everything over some dumb slut. I took a step toward him, my limbs quaking with the need to shift, but Del jumped in front of me again. Cut the shit, Roman, she snapped. I know I'm good enough to be on this tour. And I know I do my job well every single night. You're just being hateful, Cos. You're pissy we left the meet and greet early. No, he snarled, and I grabbed her arm to pull her closer. I'm pissy because ever since you showed up, that's all he fucking cares about. If that's all I cared about, I wouldn't have stayed away from my fucking fated mate for 3 weeks. I yelled back as I pulled Del behind me again. Roman rolled his eyes. Little convenient that y'all are fated, don't you think? Roman, I growled, the last shred of my humanity only paper thin. Are you calling us both liars? Nobody is calling anybody anything, Mason said as he got between us again. Let's just calm down and talk about it. There's nothing to fucking talk about, Roman yelled again, crowding Mason and trying to get in my face. Now that he was closer, I could smell the moonshine on his breath and knew there was more to this than just his issue with Del. He walked out on a meet and greet with 50 fucking VIPs so he could go fuck his new bitch. Roman, I said loud and sharp. If you call her one more fucking name, I'll break your goddamn jaw. No one's breaking anything. Mason tried again to reach us, but we were past that point. I'll call her what I want because she's the bitch that's gonna ruin the best thing that's ever. He didn't get to finish his sentence before I slammed my fist into his mouth. His teeth bit into my knuckles as blood spurted across the room. Theo, Del whisper yelled, but I grabbed her hand and ignored her. She is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and if I had to choose between her and this band, it's gonna be her every time, so don't make me do that. I threaded my fingers with Del's and drew some of her calm into me. We found out tonight that someone's been stalking Del and leaving notes in her dressing room. Tonight, he also left her a stuffed bear with a camera in it. Declan gasped as Walker and Sawyer frowned, but my eyes were glued to Roman's bloody face. We don't know what he wants, but it doesn't matter, I said. He crossed a fuck ton of lines, but leaving a camera in her room is too goddamn far. I have a bad feeling about this shit, and until we find out who it is, I'm not leaving her side. You've gotta be fucking kidding me, Roman sneered. You're pissing your pants over a couple fan letters. He left a camera, Roman, Declan said, his voice the most serious I'd ever heard it. That's fucked up. I spared him a quick, grateful glance before turning to Roman again. We've done everything that's been asked of us, but now she's in danger, and that has to come first. You either get it or you get out of my way. Roman stood there staring at me for a long time, his blue eyes hard like marbles, before he scoffed and turned away. Fuck this, he muttered as he stormed off the bus. I was sure he was leaving to find some more moonshine, but I didn't have time to deal with all his shit now. When I turned to the other guys on the bus, I was relieved to find all their expressions as worried as I felt. What are we gonna do? Declan asked, his eyes darting between us. For the first time, I was thankful Del had managed to worm her way into so many hearts. I'd hated her relationship with Declan, but if it meant I had more people who cared enough to help keep her safe, then it was worth it. I'm going to get her some werewolf security, I said, my mind racing with all the things I needed to do. I'm pretty sure the stalker is a human because the only werewolf scents I recognized were Declan and Mason's. How do you know Mason's not the stalker? Declan whisper yelled behind his hand like an idiot. Mason rolled his eyes and I shook my head. Dec, I need you to be serious for once. Del's in danger, and I'm gonna need all of you to help keep her safe. Declan rolled his eyes. We're not gonna let anything happen to Delaware. Walker, Sawyer, and Mason all nodded in agreement, and the knot in my stomach loosened for the first time since I found out someone was stalking my mate. We might have been fighting blind, but at least I had my band behind me. Just had to hope we could find the stalker before he found a weakness in our